Welcome back to the Foundry. Now typically before I do a product review, I like to get an extensive amount of experience with whatever particular product or tool I happen to be reviewing. And that's so I can bring you an informed opinion. And in this case, with Harbor Freight's Bauer grease gun, I have done just that. As a solopreneur, one of the many hats that I've worn over the years has been that of a professional lube tech. Now, while I've since moved on from that, it did afford me an opportunity to really put this grease gun to the test. I have literally pumped hundreds of tubes of grease through this gun, and toward the end of the video, I'm going to go over the pros and cons from what I've seen. But before we get into that, rather than just me sitting here telling you about it, I've actually got some video footage that shows exactly how it was used and in what environment. Let's get into it. I'm going to start with a few things at ground level and then we'll do a little bit of climbing. I enjoy using the strap even on equipment at ground level because it's just easier. It frees up both of my hands, so I can use one to hold the grease line, get it connected to the zerk. I can use the other hand to clean the zerk fitting off. So I really do like this strap. Now if you're in like an automotive shop or something along those lines, you probably wouldn't need a strap, but I have to carry this thing around a good portion of the day, so it's pretty handy. Are on a pretty routine maintenance schedule, so I'm not fully purging these bearings. They get greased pretty regular. Then you got a seal on these gearboxes. So all that is a seal. It just takes like a shot or two. But you can see so much wood fiber, and I crawl around in this stuff all day. So this gun is digesting probably, I don't know if this thing's got brushes in it or what, but it is held up in this environment. We got to do a little climbing. This is where the strap really comes in handy. There's another airlock up on top. Now before you come up here, you want to make sure you got a full grease gun. When I'm out there on them conveyors, it takes so long to climb up there. I carry a backpack where I got plenty of grease and water and that sort of thing. Now thankfully today, I don't have to go up there. I just recently did that. That's a pain in the butt. These ladders get wobbly up there too. It feels very sketchy. So what we got here, just a basic soft shield pillow block. I just put a new cartridge in the gun. One thing I really like about this gun is it primes up really quick. After you put a cartridge in there, those DeWalt's I use, they take forever to prime after you put a tube of grease in it. But this Bauer, it primes up really quick. That helps me out a lot. I go through, you know, I may go through 15, 20 tubes of grease on a, you know, over the course of the day, probably more than that some days, but if I'm sitting there having to prime that thing for half the day, it really slows me down. I gotta cover a lot of ground. Over here we have a larger pillow block. Always try to get that grease fitting clean so you don't pump contaminants into the bearing. But I tell you what, in an environment like this, it's just next to impossible. And this is pretty clean compared to some other places I have to go. So on our way down, I think I'm going to use the rope. I should have did it from up there, to be honest with you. We tie these ropes in certain places. Most of the ladders I go on don't have them. So that's why you can't rely on it being there. Then you got to carry one, or you can use the strap like I use. But just to kind of show you how this thing is held up, pretty much what I do is I lock the trigger. It's supposed to be locked. There it is. I lock that trigger, so I'm not pumping grease all the way down. And I just tie this rope through the handle, like so, where it's not going to come loose and kill somebody. Like that fella down there. We don't want to drop it on his head. I wish he'd get out of the way. I'll just have to miss him. I gotta swing that gun out. I don't even know it's there. Alright, down we go. I'm a little less encumbered not having that strap, because that gun is not, you know, it's lighter than that DeWalt. But still, you go to do a bunch of climbing and it weighs on you after a while. thought I'd do a quick comparison. So the plant uses these DeWalt guns, and physically they're very on par with each other in terms of size. However, the DeWalt is notably heavier, and you might say, well, that's because it's, you know, heavier duty, and that very well may be the case. I don't know, but I've never had any problems out of this one. But the reason I prefer this one, there's two reasons. One, I like the way it pumps grease better. It recharges after a new grease tube much faster, and it seems to put out a little more grease per pump than the DeWalt. But another thing is, with that weight difference, you got to think, I'm carrying this thing around all day, up and down ladders, up and down inclines, up on conveyors. Having the lighter gun is something I prefer personally. This wood yard over here is another area I'm responsible for. So I pretty much have to crawl up each ladder, everywhere in there, to each piece of equipment. There's a lot of you know, gearboxes and head rollers, tail rollers, that sort of thing, that have to be serviced on a regular basis. is almost the highest point of the wood yard. Now here we're on the stacker. There's no material on it because that truck that's dumping over there is dumping fines. Fines go on under the shed. So we're just up here checking all the bearings, gearboxes, oil levels, putting a little grease in them bearings. I really don't like this expanded metal under my feet. It's pretty well braced here, but it's not as sturdy as grating. So it really flexes under your feet. Of course, we're probably, I don't know, we got to be approaching 100 feet in the air. So when that reclaimer kicks on and rotates, this whole platform, did you feel it shaking a while ago? Swaying back and forth? All right, this is what it looks like after 1 year of heavy industrial use. And overall, it has fared pretty well. I was just looking for any sort of damage, and I can't see any. Of course, it's filthy, but that's to be expected. I did happen to drop this thing one time, and it was from a height of several feet. And while it did trigger a flare-up in my Tourette's, the gun itself is no worse for wear. It still works absolutely perfect. So, as you can see, I'm using a 20 volt. Of course, it's a 20 volt gun, but the 5 amp hour battery. And if you had, like, let's say an automotive shop or something like that, where you're just going to be greasing ball joints and U-joints and things like this, you could get by just fine with this 1.5 amp hour battery. But in my case, I was using it all day long, and I'm very happy with the 5 amp hour battery. If I started the day on a hot charge, I could use this gun all day long, and it never let me down. Now, as you've seen, it goes without saying, the strap is wonderful. This particular strap, I think, came off of one of the DeWalt guns that I use. It's only got the one hook. I think the one that comes with this gun hooks down here and also hooks up here. But whatever the case, the strap's very handy. A couple of things that I've really enjoyed about it is it's lighter weight than some competing brands. And as you can see, I carried this thing, or carried it, you know, I climbed ladders, inclines, conveyors, all sorts of buildings. And so the weight was very important to me, to be as light as possible. And this one was lighter than the DeWalt. I also like the fact that when you put a new grease tube in it, it primes very quick. I know, like I said, about the only other gun I've got to compare it to is the DeWalt, which is a very good gun, but it's about $50 more than this one, I believe, $40 or $50 more. But again, I'm happy with this one strictly because of it has held up, and it's lighter. It primes faster, and I like the fact that the grease tube is on the right side of the gun because of how I wear it. Now, the DeWalt comes with the grease tube. It clips over on this side, which I think it's ambidextrous. I think you can move the clip to the other side, but that's just the way it came. And I also prefer the mounting for the tube. You've got a clip here, and then you've got a sleeve there, and I really like that better than just a simple clip that some of the other brands have. Now, as far as discharging, I think the website said that this discharge is 5 ounces per minute. I know some of the other brands are like 7.5 ounces. I haven't noticed that being a problem. In fact, it puts up a tremendous amount of pressure. I don't know if it's like 10,000 psi or what, but I noticed when I'd get on a clogged grease line, this right here is your pressure relief valve, and I have had grease come out of that when the system really loaded up, but the gun itself never ran out of power. It's not like it bogged down. It kept pumping until the pressure released right there. And discharge may also be affected, at least in the way that I was looking at it, between the two guns by the coupler that you're using. They probably have different couplers. Really, those are you know, the pros. If we get over onto the side of the cons, honestly, about the only thing I have found that I don't like about it is this coupler seems to leak a lot more than on some of the other guns that I was using. Now that could be the fact that I've simply worn it out, because again, I've put hundreds of tubes of grease. I mean, this coupler has seen thousands of grease fittings. So, you know, and maybe it just needs to be taken apart or cleaned. I don't know. But I do believe these are replaceable. That's really been the only gripe I have had with this gun. And I have used it every week for the last year. And I use it for hours at a time and in a very dirty environment. And I want to mention that here at the last. I worked in a wood fiber mill, and you can see all these vents and everything. I don't see any wood fiber caked up in there. I expected this thing just to be packed so full of that it would overheat. But I've looked up, I've shined a light up in there. I don't know how that's even possible, but it has held up with that type of exposure. So I'll just wrap this up by saying that when I was first presented with that gun for this job, I was like, man, there's no way that thing's gonna hold up. Everybody else was using DeWalt's, and but surprisingly, it did extremely well. And now when I go into the lube room, if I'm presented with a Bauer or the DeWalt, I'm grabbing the Bauer just simply because it's lighter. So if you have something like a home shop, auto garage, or a farm, it would be an excellent choice. I would recommend it. If I didn't like the thing, I would tell you I didn't like it. Because I'm not sponsored by Harbor Freight, I'll probably make 30 cents off of this video on YouTube. I'm just giving you my honest opinion on it based on my experience. So if that's been helpful to you, and hopefully you'll have an informed decision when you go to buy one of these things, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.